Have you ever wondered how ancient civilizations punished their worst criminals? We're not talking about simple executions. We're talking about punishments so brutal, so creative, and so terrifying. They were designed not just to kill, but to send a message that echoed for centuries. In a world without human rights, without mercy, and often without second chances, pain was power, and fear was law. From boiling metal bulls to death by insects, history is filled with punishments that blur the line between justice and pure horror. In this video, we're counting down the 5 most brutal punishments from ancient history. Some are horrifying, some are almost unbelievable, and all of them are 100% real. Warning, what you're about to hear is not for the faint of heart. 1. Scaphism, the death boat. Our first punishment comes from the heart of the ancient Persian Empire. It was called scaphism, but it's better known by a darker name, the boats. The victim was stripped naked and forced between 2 hollowed-out wooden canoes, one on top of the other, exposing only their head, hands, and feet. Then they were force-fed milk and honey until they vomited. But that wasn't mercy. It was the beginning of the nightmare. Next, executioners would smear milk and honey all over the exposed parts of the body, and then leave the person floating under the hot sun, surrounded by insects. Flies, wasps, ants, they would swarm. The bugs didn't just bite. They crawled into every opening: ears, mouth, nose, eyes. Worse still, the mixture of food and heat caused the person's own body to rot while they were still alive. Some accounts say that victims survived like this for up to 10 days, slowly being eaten alive by insects and their own infection. Why would anyone invent something so cruel? According to ancient historians like Plutarch, this was reserved for traitors of the empire, people whose crimes were seen as a threat to the gods and the king himself. The punishment wasn't just about death. It was about humiliation, suffering, and turning the victim into a warning that no one would ever forget. In the end, there was no grave, only a floating coffin and the sound of buzzing flies. 2. The brazen bull, the bronze nightmare. Imagine being locked inside a hollow statue, a statue made of solid bronze, slowly heated from beneath until the metal glows red hot. You can't escape. You can't move. You can only scream as your body cooks from the inside out. This is the horrifying reality of the brazen bull, an invention of cruelty so creative it shocked even the tyrants of the ancient world. According to legend, the brazen bull was created in ancient Greece by an inventor named Persilos of Athens. He offered it as a gift to Phalaris, the tyrant of Agrigentum in Sicily, a man notorious for his ruthlessness. The bull was designed with terrifying precision. Victims were placed inside the belly of the statue through a hidden door. A fire was lit underneath, and slowly, the metal began to heat. As the person screamed in agony, a system of tubes and valves converted their cries into the sound of a bull's roar, so bystanders would hear an animal, not a human. The execution was both a performance and a punishment. The smell of burning flesh, the eerie sound of a bull moaning in pain. It was meant to entertain, to intimidate, and to remind the public of who held the power. But here's the twist. Legend says that after showing the invention to Phalaris, Persilos, the very man who built the bull, was thrown into it himself to test it. The tyrant wanted to see if it worked. Spoiler alert, it did. The brazen bull remained in use for centuries, especially in the Roman world, where it was used on early Christians, rebels, and so-called enemies of the state. It wasn't just death. It was death transformed into art, a dark, fiery performance that symbolized the absolute control of rulers and the helplessness of their victims. 3. Lynchi, death by 1,000 cuts. Some punishments are designed to be fast. Lynchi was the opposite. It was known as death by 1,000 cuts, and it was one of the most agonizing ways to die in all of history. Used for over 1,000 years in Imperial China, lynchi was reserved for the worst of the worst: traitors, murderers, and those who committed crimes against the emperor. The process was slow, intentionally slow. The condemned person was tied to a wooden frame, arms stretched out, body exposed. Then the executioner would begin to cut, not to kill, but to hurt. A piece of flesh from the chest, then the arms, then the legs. Dozens, even hundreds of slices were made, removing muscles, tendons, skin, and only at the very end would the executioner deliver a fatal wound, often to the heart or throat. Why so cruel? Lynchi wasn't just about physical pain. In traditional Chinese beliefs, the body must remain whole to move peacefully into the afterlife. So this punishment wasn't just execution, it was spiritual destruction. The victim's soul was believed to be damned forever. Sometimes family members of the accused would be forced to watch. Other times, the public was invited to witness the act, turning it into a political message. This is what happens when you defy the empire. Lynching was officially banned in 1905. But by then, it had already carved its place in history as a symbol of pain, shame, and total domination. 4. Flaying alive, skin as a message. What's worse than death? Living through your body being peeled apart slowly while people watch. That's the horror of flaying alive, a punishment used by several ancient civilizations, including the Assyrians, the Persians, and even parts of medieval Europe. The idea was terrifyingly simple: strip the victim of their skin while they were still breathing. Why? Because skin is identity, and removing it was the ultimate symbol of erasing someone from existence. Ancient Assyrian kings were notorious for using flaying to punish rebels. After crushing an uprising, they would take the leaders and skin them in public. The flayed skin was then nailed to the city walls as a warning to everyone. This is what happens when you rise against the king. The Persians, too, used this method. One ancient account tells of a corrupt judge who was flayed. And then, his skin was used to cover the judge's chair, a grim reminder for the next man to choose justice over bribery. Even in Europe, during the Middle Ages, flaying was occasionally used in extreme cases of treason or sacrilege. The message was always the same: pain is power. Victims often died from shock, blood loss, or infection, but some were kept alive for hours. Special knives were used. Trained executioners knew how to cut slowly, deeply, but not fatally, at least not right away. It wasn't just punishment, it was theater, a political tool designed to shock entire populations into obedience. Today, we can barely imagine the cruelty, but in the ancient world, fear was more effective than armies. 5. Impalement, the spear of horror. Among all ancient punishments, there is one that stands out for its sheer terror, humiliation, and slow cruelty: impalement. It wasn't just a method of killing, it was a message carved into flesh and sky. A death so horrific that entire cities would surrender just to avoid seeing it. The most infamous user of impalement? Vlad the Impaler, the real-life inspiration for Dracula. In 15th century Wallachia, modern-day Romania, Vlad used impalement to terrify his enemies, especially the invading Ottoman forces. When his lands were threatened, he responded not just with battle, but with fear as a weapon. Thousands of prisoners, soldiers, criminals, even nobles were impaled on massive wooden stakes. The sharpened pole was inserted through the body, usually from the rectum or vagina, carefully avoiding vital organs, so the victim wouldn't die immediately. Some lived for hours, others for days. These poles were then planted upright in rows, covering entire hillsides, forming what some called forests of the dead. Imagine marching toward a city and seeing thousands of people slowly dying on spikes. But Vlad wasn't the first to use it. The Assyrians, the Persians, and even the Romans practiced impalement as a form of ultimate deterrence. The psychological effect was devastating. Entire armies retreated without fighting. Civilians surrendered out of sheer fear. And the message was clear: we don't just kill, we display. In a world where fear ruled more than law, impalement was the crown jewel of horror. These punishments weren't just about death, they were about control, terror, and the ultimate display of power. To us, they seem inhuman, monstrous even. But in ancient times, they were seen as necessary, even divine. Fear was currency, and rulers spent it without mercy. So the next time you read a history book that talks about justice, remember that for centuries, justice came with blades, fire, and screams. Which of these punishments shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more chilling stories from the shadows of history, hit that subscribe button, because the past isn't just dates and kings. It's blood, bone, and the darkness we try to forget.